Good evening, poultry keepers. Good to see everyone here tonight. And we got a good show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about grooming your birds for show. The last show we talked about conditioning, and now we're going to talk about grooming. And we've got the whole crew with us tonight. Jeff and Melissa and Karen, welcome. Good to see all your smiling faces tonight. Um, Well, I won't spoil that. Why don't we just go ahead and get started? We're going to be doing your questions along and along. So if you have a question, be sure to type it in for us, and we'll do our very best to answer it for you. But let's get on with grooming our birds for the show.
Right. Right. Can I ask a quick question before we get started? Can
Yes.
you remind us what the difference between grooming and conditioning is?
Well, conditioning really starts before the egg is laid. And conditioning is that long term thing that we go through of taking a chick from a hatching egg, incubating, hatching, brooding, rearing, on up until maturity. So it's all those management processes, all the different feeding regimens, and all that goes into making a bird in good condition to show.
Okay.
Bodybuilding, feather growth, the whole 9 yards.
Gotcha.
And grooming is that sort of last minute um, primping and preparation. It's things like washing our birds and getting them all spit polished and shined up, um, coop training and those sorts of things. Uh, but that's kind of to me, it's a short term process that we go through, where conditioning is a much more long term situation.
Okay. All right. All right. Are you ready for the next question, Rip?
Lay it on me.
All right. So, in your opinion, is it necessary to wash my birds before a show?
Well, if you have white colored birds or lighter colored birds, loose feathered breeds like Asiatics, Cochins, Brahmas, Orpingtons, or Silkies, yeah, it is necessary. Some other colors may or may not be if you've got Rhode Island Reds or dark brown leggeds, for example, and they aren't exceptionally dirty. A quick going over with a rag and sprucing up their comb and their face and their legs may be all that you need. But if they look like they've been rooting around in the mud with the hogs, you probably need to wash even those dark colored birds.
Okay. So, speaking of washing, what is needed to wash these birds?
Well, it's really pretty basic when it comes right down to it. You want about 3 tubs of water. You want warm water, and now not hot. You don't want to scald the things, but warm water with some soap in it of some description. Now, and I'll get into that in just a minute. In the second tub, you want to add just plain water with a couple of splashes of vinegar in it for rinsing, and that the vinegar will help cut the soap and get it out of the bird's feathers so they dry and look normal. And then the last tub is just this basic water, and that will help rinse out the vinegar and anything else. So you're going to wash them once and you're going to rinse them twice. Um, when
Okay.
it comes to soaps, I like, I'm old fashioned, okay? I like to use a soap product. I don't like to use a detergent product. I know some folks wash their birds with Dawn dishwashing detergent. Um, that's a pretty harsh thing. That will strip the oil right out of the feathers on your birds. I mean, let's face it, at oil spills, that's the detergent of choice for washing shorebirds that get oil all over them. They put them in that Dawn dishwashing detergent and they come out squeaky clean.
They
Uh,
even have a little baby duckling
yeah.
on the bottle.
hmm Um, but what I like to use when I first started was I would get a bar of ivory soap
Mhm.
and grate it up on a cheese grater and then dissolve some into my tub of water. And how much depended on how big the tub of water was or how many birds I had to wash or how dirty they were. But there's also some products on the market that I started using later on, um, and it's for washing horses, and it's called Cowboy Magic. Uh, that's some pretty good stuff. It doesn't strip the oils out of the feathers. They also have some products for a little bit heavier duty use, like if your birds are stained.
Hmm.
Uh, they make one for green stains, which I'm assuming are grass stains, and one for yellow stains, um, which are going to be your dirt and your mud and that kind of stuff. Now, when we're talking about stains, if you have a bird that is brassy, in other words, he has the males have this yellow look in their hackles and in their saddles, that's not going to come out. That's basically a genetic problem that you cannot wash out, and the only way to get rid of it is to wait until the bird molts. Now, there's some thoughts out there that it's brought on by feeding excess corn or too much greens, but if they don't have that genetic tendency towards brassiness, they won't turn brassy. I had some white rocks that were silver based, um, and they never ever turned brassy. They always stayed nice and white.
So in that, you said the first tub is soapy water.
Hmm.
Like how much soap are we talking? Like how sudsy do you want?
I don't
Like
want it to look like a bubble bath or anything like that.
you don't want that?
No, 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 because that's too much trouble to get it out once you get started. Um, you just kind of have to play around with it the first time or two till you find out what works for you. Like I said, it depends on how dirty are your birds.
Hmm.
If they're really dirty, you're going to need more soap.
Right.
How many birds are you going to try to wash before you have to throw that dirty water out and start all over again? Um, I
Okay.
felt like if I could wash three birds in the same tub of water, I was doing pretty good. Um,
And do you just use your hands?
yes,
Okay.
and you want to remember this is more. You're not scrubbing them by any stretch of the imagination because you're going to break feathers, but it's more like a stroking and a rubbing, maybe but a light rubbing between your fingers to get the dirt out.
Got it.
Somebody asked me one time, said, "How do you keep a white bird white?" And I just fell back to what one of my mentors told me one time: you just don't let them get dirty, uh, which is easier said than done
Yeah.
sometimes.
Have a
But lots of
steering too with
good
them.
clean bedding all the time.
Gotcha. Okay. I think you might have covered this, but can't hurt to hear it one more time. What is the basic washing process?
Well, like I said, you start them out in that soapy water.
Hmm.
Um, you get the dirt off of them or out of them. Um, then you take them from that over into the rinse water with vinegar in it,
Hmm.
and just work them up and down in that, and use your fingers to loosen up the feathers and make sure you get that rinse water down in there so you get all that soap residue out. And
Right.
then from there you take them over to the just plain water and just rinse them up and down in that a few times to get the vinegar. I mean, you don't want to take a bird that smells like a pickle barrel to a show.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I've heard you're saying vinegar, but I've heard some people using glycerin for something in the water. Is that
and I know Craig Hansen does this. In that last rinse, he adds a little bit of glycerin
okay?
to that rinse to kind of help keep the feathers soft and replenish any oils or anything like that. I I didn't do coaching, so I didn't do that. I was doing white rocks, and I never felt like I really needed that. Um, the one thing I will tell you, if you're just starting out, to stay away from, and people will advise using bluing, laundry bluing in the water, and that is ticklish stuff to use. I mean, we're talking like maybe two or three drops, but some people think, oh, two or three drops. Well, listen, one, two, three. And what they wind up doing is permanently dyeing that bird a light sky blue color.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do to get it out until the bird molts.
Yeah, that'd be a bummer.
So
Speaking of
I would suggest folks, stay away from that glycerin. It's bad stuff. Put the hex on it. If
Speaking of proportions,
yes,
do you have any idea how much vinegar to water? I mean, is it 50 to 1, 200 to 1, or?
honestly, I used a highly scientific method of. I took a gallon of vinegar, I took the top off, and I went 1, 2, and now so it's
Yeah,
2 glugs. We'll just leave it at that. How
we
See,
about
used
that?
to do
everybody's
that for the
amount of
horses, and
water.
I'd do the same thing. You just kind of a couple glugs in, you're good to go.
That's right.
All right, we got a few questions here
Okay.
related to washing, so let's do that. So Chase wants to know if the soap removes oil from the feathers.
Soap does not remove oil as bad as detergents remove oil.
Can you give us examples?
Um, Ivory soap, you can still buy that.
Okay.
Just
They
a
make
bar
an
of ivory.
ivory like dish soap. Would that be okay?
Yes, as long as it says soap and not detergent on the bottle.
Okay. Gotcha.
That will be your guiding light there. If it says something like dish detergent, that's a little bit harsher chemical, and that good chance it could probably strip the oils out of the feathers.
Kim,
And we're doing this washing process just a few days before the show, 3 to 5 days before the show. If you don't do it in advance, because they got to have time to dry out, get their feathers preened back into position, and the whole 9 yards. But that's 3 to 5 days is not really enough time for them to get much oil work back into their plumage from their oil gland.
Mm.
So that's some reason you want to be careful about trying to stripping all the oil out of their feathers.
all right, hold on. We got Matthew wants to know what the glycerin that you don't use, Rip. What does it do for the bird?
It will help replenish any lost oils. It makes the feathers a little bit softer. Think of it like conditioner for those of us who have hair, for your hair, uh, or conditioner for a dog's coat or for a horse's coat or something of that nature.
I'm sitting here trying to think, where does one buy glycerin? Is that in the grocery store? Is that
Oh
in?
yeah, you can get like a pint bottles of glycerin, a quart bottle. I don't know.
Really? I know you
Yeah,
can get it in bars from like tack shops.
uh, feed stores carry glycerin. Usually, it's in the giant gallon-sized jugs, and
Hmm.
glycerin is something that a little dab goes a long way. I mean, you want just like a couple of teaspoonfuls in a tub of rinse water because it doesn't take much. You want enough to help replenish the oils, but you don't want enough to help make things sticky and gummy.
Mm.
So that's where you got to be careful using that.
All right, we have a Shannon here. Always puts bug killer in the last rinse. I'm not quite sure. I'm thinking at first I thought like off, but now I'm thinking more like a poultry protector.
Well, and I know where she's coming from with this.
Okay.
What I do when I coop in my birds, I carry some Adams flea spray with me,
Mhm.
and I give them one squirt at the base of the hackle, one under each wing, and then one at the base of the tail, and treat them that way before I put them in the coop.
Does
That keeps
does
them.
vinegar help with bugs at all?
No,
Okay.
not really.
These are people helping me know that I'm just ignorant that I've not seen glycerin on the shelf, but it's available. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what it would look like either.
It's just a clear liquid,
Okay.
just a clear liquid.
There's a lot of things in the store I've never seen before. I'm finding that out.
You need to get out and about in your local Wally World.
Mm.
There you
Wander
go.
around. Okay. So, what happens if my bird is just filthy, covered in stains? What is the best thing for removing those stains?
The best thing is to wash them just like you normally would,
Mhm.
and then use one of those stain removal products, but go slow with it. Don't overdo it. Some of it you can just spray on and then kind of rub it in and take it a little bit at a time because um, if you're dealing with tough stains, those chemicals that they use can be a little harsher than just your regular soap that you're washing in. So you
Mhm.
want to, you want to kind of take it slow, do a little bit at a time. Make sure you rinse it out really, really well. but I know the Cowboy Magic products. I always use the one for yellow stains. Uh, that always did a pretty good if you got really dirty stains. Um, like I said, now that you're gonna sooner or later you're gonna run up with a stain that you just can't get out.
Mm.
So you've got two options at that point: take another bird to the show as a replacement, or take that dirty bird to the show, but it's probably not going to place because all the others are going to be nice and white. If it's a white bird,
How close together can you bathe birds? So let's say you've got one that you washed it, it's not near as clean as you'd like it to be, so you'd like to wash it again. Can you do it like within a couple days span, or is that not ideal?
you could, but I think if I had a bird I thought I was going to have to do that with,
Mm-hmm.
rather than 3 to 5 days out, I would go 5 to 7 days out for that first initial wash,
Okay.
and then do the second wash at about 3 to 5 days. And that's just me trying to be on the safe side,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, well, I'll wash him today and I'll wash him tomorrow, and it's
Okay.
Can I ask what kind of stains do birds get? Probably just because I've had black and dark red birds before. But
mhm.
I mean, if I had white birds, I bet I'd know.
White birds seem
Right.
to have a penchant for getting into most anything that will stain them.
Okay, so mulberry trees or just
You name it.
okay.
Red clay will stain, grass will
Oh,
stain. Um,
red clay's
even the sandy soil we have here in Florida will stain a white bird if they're in it all the time. That's why so many people who raise white birds keep them indoors on pine shavings that are
Mm,
changed frequently and that are stacked pretty deep.
okay. All right, Rip, I'm pretty excited for this question next.
Uh
So,
oh.
how do I dry my birds after they're washed?
You get those heavy industrial strength clothespins. I'm
Mm-hmm.
kidding. I'm kidding on this.
It's like, yes, this is the answer I wanted.
Um, I would take mine out of the last rinse and use my hand as the squeegee to try to squeeze out as much water as I could, and then wrap them up in an old beach towel or something like that, a bath towel. Um, some folks refer to that now as chicken burritos because all that's left sticking out is their head.
Oh, that's
Um, they will leave them in that and let the towel soak up as much
mm,
moisture as it can out of them.
mm-hmm.
I like to let my birds dry naturally. So after I removed them from the towel, I would take them and put them back in a coop with heavy pine shavings
Mm-hmm.
in a warm area. And I say warm because sometimes we're showing it's winter time and it can get quite cold. So you don't want them to catch a cold or anything like that. But you want to make sure it doesn't have to be like 85 or 90 degrees. 75 degrees will work.
All right. So, what if I want them to dry like immediately? Can I use a blow dryer?
You can, but
Oh,
it's
really?
kind of like bluing. You have to be really, really careful with it.
Okay.
Now, breeds that are commonly used a blow dryer on them are silkies, cochins,
Mm-hmm.
the Asiatics, loose feathered breeds.
Okay.
Because what you can wind up doing with a blow dryer, if you're not careful, is you can take a bird that is fairly close feathered or tight feathered, like a
Mm-hmm.
Rhode Island red, and you can make them very loose feathered looking because most folks use a blow dryer and they're holding the bird here with a head here. They don't go like this. They
Okay.
turn that bird around and they
So you
get
want to
out.
go with the feathers?
You
Is that
want
what
to
you're
go
saying?
with the lay of the feathers, or you're going to have a puffy looking bird on your hands that
Mm,
is not going to do well in a show.
okay. All right. So the $1 million question then is: once they're all clean, how do they stay clean?
Again, I would put mine back into the show coop on deep litter, and that you have to be pretty religious about taking the poop out because fresh poop will stain a freshly washed bird faster than you can imagine.
Oh, and they'll
Now,
find it.
one thing that I learned is that if you keep them on a grain-based diet from the time you wash them until you bring them home from the show, that helps tighten and firm up the poop so it's not quite as messy and they're less likely to get stained by it. But you still got to get it out of there because I guarantee you they're going to lay down in it, they're going to roll over in it, they're going to try to dust bathe in it. Um, so it's just one of those things you put your little latex gloves on and go on poop patrol.
So you have to take the whole week off of work, right? So that you can
No, that's not quite that
hourly
bad.
hourly get out there. And
Mhm.
I'm assuming you pen everybody individually at this point.
Yes,
They're all in
yes.
their own.
So, is the chicken's first reaction to getting wet to have a dust bath afterwards?
No, because they're usually still pretty wet.
Okay.
So they're more interested in. You've seen chickens after they get rained on.
Yeah.
So what are they doing? They're
Not a
sitting
whole
over
lot.
there kind of preening all the feathers back in place. So they're going to be doing pretty much that.
Okay.
But there will come a point they will eventually want to dust bathe.
Okay. All right. So, Rip, is there an easy way to keep their shanks and feet clean?
The easiest way to clean them, and it's time consuming, and I know it because I've done it numerous times, but let them soak, let their shanks and their feet soak in this warm soapy water,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then take a soft bristle brush like a toothbrush and just keep brushing and trying to get that dirt out from between the scales. If they've spent their life out on the sandy soil, powdery soil that we've got here in Florida, it's really going to be packed up under there. And then you're going to have to use something like a toothpick or a lady's an orange stick like ladies would use to clean out the cuticles on their fingernails, something of that nature. You don't want to use anything sharp because you don't want to make them bleed,
Right.
uh, but something of that nature. And there is something you can make that will make that job easier. It's called a grooming sling, and I've posted about it in our group, Poultry Keepers 360. If you go on there and just search the group for grooming sling, and all it is a rectangular piece of heavy cotton duck material with two holes cut out for legs, and you just fold it up around the bird, and then you hang it.
Hmm.
And that way you can turn the bird any way you want to. You've got two hands free. Um, I use a dog grooming table and use the grooming arm
Mm-hmm.
to hang the bird in the sling from. But
Okay.
it makes life a lot easier than trying to figure out how you're going to hold a bird and a leg and get after him with one of those cleaning sticks.
Okay.
Not an easy task.
So if you don't have help, then is
It's
that
a
the best way to go
lifesaver.
about that?
It
Okay.
is a lifesaver.
Gotcha. All right. Well, then what about cleaning their face, combs, wattles, and earlobes?
I do that. Excuse me. When I'm washing them, I'll
Mm-hmm.
take that same soft bristle brush and I'll lightly go over.
I can't
Oh,
help
you
it.
found it! Yay!
Oh, yes. I'm so
Uh,
glad you found that, Karen.
So you
Here
just
in the
had there's
Johnny
just
on the
one
spot.
slit in there, right? Just a single slit that both legs are sticking through.
Look in the center picture, the one up above. I don't know why they drew it that way, but there's actually two.
Okay. I can't make it any bigger, but
Um,
okay. I see.
but give their face a light scrubbing because they're going to accumulate dry, dead skin on there, and it's going to look white and make them look pasty. You want to get that taken off. Um, Not do that to their face, to their comb, to the wattles, and to the earlobes.
So you don't
Okay.
just hold their head underwater in the first of the three.
No, because
Okay.
takes a little bit of a scrubby dub to get all that dry skin
I
off.
think you could use it now with all the electric toothbrushes. Do you think that would be too rough if you used not the like water picks, but like the just a
Yeah.
little
Oh, I don't know why it wouldn't.
vibrating
Just
one.
just make sure you've got a soft bristle. 'Cause that
So
might even work
I
better
want to
for
use
the
a
leg.
power tool for everything.
how well did the birds handle being handled like this? Does it take? I imagine it takes some time.
I'll tell you something, Alyssa. You would be amazed at the number of times I have put a bird in that warm, soapy water, and they will literally go to sleep.
Really?
Yes. Once they get used to it, man, they just kind of like me in a hot tub. I just go limp and just
Like a spa.
relax.
All right. Are you ready for the next question?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So, is there anything that can be put on the clean feathers to make them shine?
There is, and I
Mm.
hate it. No,
I think you might
we
have mentioned that in the last
we
show
talked
too.
about this on our last live stream. Most folks call it the pink spray, and it's a hair care product that really builds a nice shine. And they make similar. They make a product, I believe it's called Show Sheen,
Hmm.
for spraying
Yep.
on cattle and horses and that kind of stuff. But if you overdo it, it's literally hard to hold the chicken. And I have come very, very close to dropping chickens before that were they used too much. I mean, they hose those things down in that show sheen. Um, and if it gets on slick concrete,
Mm.
you can create a very dangerous slip and fall hazard for people as well.
Okay.
So what I find rather than spraying it on the chicken like most folks do is I carry a silk grooming cloth with me when I go to a show, just a square silk handkerchief, and I'll spray just a little bit on that and then rub that with the lay of the feathers on the chicken.
Hmm.
The other thing is it's one of those products that if you use too much of it, it will attract dust. It will actually stick to the chicken. It'll draw it right out of the air.
It's the
Uh,
opposite of what you're trying to do after you just
exactly.
cleaned them.
It makes them look dull.
Mm. All right. All right. What about their combs? Anything to put them on there to make them look nice and red? Red lipstick, something like that.
Wait, no, you can't. Remember, you can't add color to a chicken. That's
Oh,
called
right.
flaking. But there are all sorts of comb dressing recipes out there. I know folks use a product called Vetrex that's sold as a treatment for respiratory
Everything.
illnesses. And
It's a treatment for absolutely everything.
I know it, it's like Thailand. Uh, but you want something that's a little astringent and that has a little bit of oil in it.
Hmm.
Um, the guy who shared this with me when I was like 18 years old, I've been using it ever since. I take a small dropper bottle and fill it halfway with alcohol.
Vodka.
Rubbing.
Wow.
Which one?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get through this, y'all. I really am. Fill it halfway with alcohol, rubbing alcohol. Thank you very much. And the rest of the way with olive oil. And then
Okay.
shake it up and then put a drop or two on my fingers and rub it between my fingers. And I'll rub it on their combs and their wattles and their earlobes and rub it around on their face. You don't want to get too much on there. I've actually seen where somebody put too much on a bird's head right up here next to the comb and it sort of matted down the feathers.
Mm.
He only had reserve show champion. That bird would have been show champion had that not been done.
Mm.
Uh, so it's kind of like brill cream, a little dab will do you, and a little bit goes a long way.
All right.
But just simply rubbing alcohol and olive oil, cheap, effective. Most of us have got it in our homes already anyway.
What does the rubbing alcohol do? So why are you mixing those two
It
together?
makes the combs red. It's that astringent quality.
Okay. And then the oil just makes it shiny,
It just
like
makes it
moisturizes
shine.
it almost.
Mhm.
And you're
Okay.
now you're talking about doing that what, like minutes before they close the aisle for the show or the day before?
Usually I would do that. I bring my bird. I do it when I coop in my birds originally
Okay.
for the first time. Now I try to get there in time to go back over my birds before judging starts, Is there have they gotten dirty somehow? Do I need to address that issue? Do I need to get after them with something like some wet wipes and try to get as much of that off as I can? Do I need to touch up their combs or their wattles? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Okay.
I've also seen folks use Vicks Vapor Rub and rub that on the comb for the same reason. It's got all that menthol in it, and that'll make a comb really redden up.
Okay. So would you use that, or would you use your alcohol and olive oil mixture? Which do you
I
think
use
works?
my olive oil and alcohol. It just some things I like change, some things I don't. That's one thing I don't like change. I've been using it
Yeah.
for almost forever. Um,
Would the smell of the Vicks put off a judge?
no,
Okay.
I smell it frequently when I'm judging birds.
All right.
That's a
The only
nostalgia.
thing that'll put off a judge is the smell of a Sharpie.
Of what?
A Sharpie,
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
where they've tried to color in the white tip of a feather, which is
Mm-hmm.
illegal or something of that nature.
All right. What about their legs now? Is there
I
any?
use the same thing, the same olive oil and alcohol.
Okay.
I might spend a little more time buffing it, and I just happen to remember this. I had a good friend who was an automobile mechanic, who worked in a car dealership, and when they got the mechanics rags back in from being cleaned, they brought them back in. They had all been treated with lanolin,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what he used to rub his birds down with, and his the legs, their feet, their beak, um, and that lanolin would really brought out the shine.
Okay.
All right, hold on. We got a breaking news question from
Oh,
Deanna.
yes.
All right, should you just use the olive oil on a silky since you specifically don't want to make the comb red?
you can. Um, I found that thinning it and that is not going to make the comb red on a silky. I don't believe. I've never tried it, but I can't imagine that it would. But I think if you dilute the olive oil slightly with a little bit of alcohol, it will make it easier to apply. Now, having said that, I would suggest, Deanna, that you go to a silky exhibitor
Mm-hmm.
and say, what should I use? What do you use? What is safe to use?
You're doing better than me. I'm sitting here trying to go, is there silkies have a comb? That's,
Yes,
that's so
they do.
Yeah. So if they didn't have a silky exhibitor they could go talk to, I guess that you could try it like, I don't know, a couple weeks before, see what happens.
I would try it, I think, on a bird that I wasn't going to take to the show.
Okay.
Um, that way, if it messes up, you haven't messed up
Yeah.
your valuable show prospect.
Right. Okay.
someone throw a question in there for Jeff so we can make sure that he's still awake. So, go on.
What's the question?
How do you mean that's for me? How do you make your legs?
No, I'm saying that I want somebody to throw a question in there so that you
okay.
can feel. So
I
you
was
can
gonna say
feel
that's
good.
not my question.
No, I know.
But
I thought you had one. We were all waiting.
No, I want somebody to ask something.
All right, Jeff, is there anything that you can feed a bird to make them shiny?
There you go.
and I was going to interject this way back, but I hate to get Rip off track. So,
Not hard
you
to
know,
do.
I was sitting here trying to find out what the actual what the healthy oil level of a chicken feather is supposed to be. Couldn't find much, but it says about 6%. And so on some of the nutritional stuff, when we've talked about it, people have heard me say I like to see the diet at 5%. That way, I know that oil gland is working, at a higher level. But yeah, poultry feathers. So if the diet has the correct type and amount of fat in it, that should help keep those legs nice and shiny. So, but it's also going to be a little bit of a function because they're scales of keratin. So making sure that you have some good keratin type ingredients in the feed, which most feeds don't have, but other than what comes from corn, But anytime the corn's getting diluted, then you're going to be reducing the amount of keratin that's being transferred. But I would think that oil in the feed and keratin content are going to be the top two feed components for making legs shinier.
Okay. All right. Well, speaking of feed, oh, go on, Rip. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask Jeff, and I had mentioned that it's just I found out from experience that feeding a grain-based feed helps tighten up the stools and all that, and easier to care from it from that standpoint. Am I off base with suggesting they do that? I don't want to screw up their normal routine diet, but I mean, we're talking about a period of maybe 3 to 5 days.
Well, so I've seen what you're talking about, and when people feed crumbles and pellets, the manure tends to be a little more pudding-like, right? Less firmness to it.
Yeah.
And people that are feeding a grain-based diet, what we call a mash feed, doesn't have to be whole grain. I see a better density, a more firmness to manure. I see that all the time. So, I mean, what you're telling them is true. I don't know that I want people running out to buy a whole grain diet, with whole kernels of corn and peas and, something that looks like a bowl of Fruit Loops that doesn't have a whole lot of nutrition to it. So, yes, the grain diet is going to give you a better manure, dryness or firmness, or it's going to make it a lot easier for you to clean it out of the show pen. That's for sure. Versus, a crumble or a mash.
But a diet change the week before sounds also a possible problem. Like, you're going to throw that bird into molt, or you're going to...
Yeah, that's a great segue into our next question. So should they be fed like normal then?
Yes and no. And what can happen at a show is they will feed them their normal amount of feed, or a lot of times they'll go through and I encourage folks to take a feed cup with them, their own feed cup, because most shows don't provide those, because you don't want to feed a bird on the floor of the coop, because then they start scratching around, and when they scratch they back up, and when they back up they jam their tail into the wire and screw up the look of that. But they'll just fill up that cup full of feed and hang it on the side of the coop in the mornings. What can happen if your bird is hungry, they'll really go after the food, and then all of a sudden their crop starts to look like they have swallowed a baseball. Mm-hmm. And that throws off the look of the bird for the judge. So what I suggest they do is, you don't want to cut their daily amount of feed, but maybe just give them a smaller amount before judging starts. Mm-hmm. And then after their judge, you can go ahead and fill up the cup and hang it in there if you want to. Okay. But that's.
So, did you feed a whole grain diet whenever you were showing?
Actually, what I would take was a pelleted ration and mix that about 50% with a good scratch.
Okay.
Not knowing then what I know now. But okay. I think after just having listened to Jeff, I would probably just kind of graduate everybody over to a good mash diet and let it go at that.
Are there different protocols for feeding? I mean, how much control do you have? Is somebody going to run around and put different feed in your bird's cage or anything?
That used to be the standard deal. Show management would walk down the aisle with a bucket of scratch feed and throw a handful in each pen. Well, where are they throwing it? Right on the bottom of the coop. What I started doing was writing on their owner will feed in a bright, like a red marker or something like that.
To get their attention.
Yeah. Because some shows do, some shows don't. It just depends on the luck of the draw and how that show decides to do things.
And I'm thinking part of my problem is in North Carolina, the state fair, the poultry are there for what, 5 days, 6 days. You have to leave them there to show in the. Now that's not a normal APA show, but I'm like, surely somebody's feeding those birds, without permission. So, um, but
Usually it's the folks trying to feed them corn dogs and cotton candy and all that other stuff.
there you go. That's
It's good for them, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
All right. So what about, I'm excited about this question too. So we're going to switch gears a little bit from feed and going back to grooming. What about grooming waterfowl?
You know, waterfowl, when it comes right down to it, are probably the easiest birds of all to groom for a show. As long as you keep them relatively clean, if they're not walking around in mud or wet grass all the time. Uh, Really, all you need to do, and I've got some good friends that they have calls. Now, admittedly, they keep their calls in wire bottom uh, coops, and they just put like a little dishpan of water in there, just plain water, and they just let them bathe and splash around and have a good time, and they'll dump that out and give them some fresh water. And in a day or so, those things are spit shined. They look great. So as long as they have access to water to bathe in, not much you really have to do. You want to give her the beaks are going over and make sure they're clean. The same thing for their feet and for their legs. But they're pretty easy keepers to get ready for a show by and large.
We lost Alyssa's volume.
I'm back.
Ta-da. Tell us again.
I'm sorry, Rip, I missed that. Did you say that you do bathe them or you don't?
I don't bathe them. I don't use soapy water. I'll just give them a tub of water and let them do their ducky and goosey things, and they'll do it themselves.
Really?
Yeah.
So they'll get nice and wet.
You would be amazed at the number of waterfowl that are smuggled in. I probably shouldn't say this out loud. Smuggled into motels at night and given free range in the bathtub for a while.
How fun? Could you imagine if you walked in and saw that? That'd be awesome.
Happens more than you would imagine.
I bet you the hotel rooms in Ohio are not thrilled about it. Yeah.
Or Knoxville, Tennessee,
Hmm.
as a friend of mine can attest to, who tried to smuggle in a white China goose.
Obviously, like I said, you still need to do face. Or you still need to do feet and nails. I had Muscovies. I can't even imagine trying to get their nails clean.
Muscovies, those things can hurt you with those claws that they have on their feet. And Muscovies are certainly not a breed that I would recommend for young kids because they can scratch you badly and lacerate your arms if you're not careful.
But turkeys, guineas, they treat the same as chickens.
But pretty much the same as chicken. I don't know. I never washed my turkeys when I showed them. I don't really know of anybody who did. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I didn't.
All right. You ready for some questions from the peoples?
Yes, by all means.
All right. So, what is the ideal length for a chicken's toenails?
Gosh, I don't know that there's an ideal length. I know when you're clipping it back, I would try to clip them back to where there was, obviously you don't want to clip it into the quick because then it's going to start bleeding. But I also didn't like to leave a straight across cut on the toenail. I would like to round it over a little bit, just so it looks natural, like you put a beak or something, or a spur or something of that nature.
Would you file that?
I'm sorry?
Would you file it after you cut it? Or just
I'm like Karen. I like power tools. Just get a little.
Okay.
Except I use battery operated. She goes the 120 route.
Are you cutting nails and trimming spurs and stuff just for the show, or would you recommend people keep on that year round?
I do that routinely, and that's something I talked about. I think we might have talked about it last week.
Mhm.
That when I'm going through my birds, I usually have a heavy duty toenail clipper on a string around my neck. And if I see a beak that's getting too long, I can just grab the bird up and snip, snip, snip. Or if the toenails are getting long, I can trim those back as well. The spurs, I would usually use a Dremel too long.
I have a question later that I don't know that you'll answer, so we might about faking, but no problems with beak trimming. You're okay to trim beaks as much as you want or as little as you want for showing.
Well, when you trim it, you want it to look natural and balanced on the bird's head.
Yeah.
You don't want it to look like it's been. Um,
Yeah, but if you have there could be some. Are there any defects of the beak that you could hide by trimming? Not really, right?
no, not really. A good judge, some folks have tried that with crooked beak, but it doesn't. It's not hard to spot that.
Okay. That wasn't personal. I just was curious. Let's see. I believe this was back to the Cowboy Magic people. I think they have a green spray that she
Yes.
was saying that they like for the day of. So just sharing that.
Okay.
All right. JS is trying to make me feel better by asking what department of a store for the glycerin? Cleaning supplies, personal care, body soap.
That's a good
You
question.
just find it kind of associated with the first aid and healthcare.
Oh, like by the band-aids and the
Yeah.
and the hydrogen peroxide, etc.
Mhm.
There we go.
So I think my use of glycerin is very different from what is standard. So what else is glycerin used for if it's in the first aid area? This also isn't relevant, sorry.
It's for
Or is it
lighting
after?
things on fire, I think.
No, it's not.
No?
I,
Well, what
I
do you
really
use it
don't
on,
know.
Alyssa?
Okay.
What do you use it for? You have to share since you said that.
We used it to like clean tack,
Okay.
like clean and
Yeah.
like leather.
Okay.
Mhm.
Make candles? No, I'm saying that.
Exactly. That's what we do in Pennsylvania.
All right. We talked about this for a minute, but I think Jeff might have an opinion on this too. So I've heard that the sun can make white birds yellowish. Is that true? Well, I guess it's all the list of things that can make white birds yellow. So I think you said earlier, Rip, that you thought brassiness was partially genetic.
Yes. Now, can certain things make it worse? I think so. Diets high in corn, uh, access to a lot of fresh green feed seem to make it worse. Sometimes even exposure to sunlight seems to make it worse. But it's because they have that initial genetic propensity towards brassiness is really what starts it.
And is there anything feed wise, Jeff? Is the whole give your give your bird too much corn and it's going to turn it yellow? And they're trying to use corn to yellow their legs up. So,
Right. And Rip, Rip was absolutely correct that so in a diet that would be really heavy on corn and also in a group of birds that was out on some really nice green grass, you're piling in a bunch of, pigmentation and carotenoids. And so, yeah, you're going to stand that chance. And also, if they're exposed to a lot of direct sunlight, it's going to help pop that pigment, up out of the skin. So feather pigment is actually, for the most part, underlying in the skin, and it's waiting for that opportune moment or the right circumstances for it to show up. And I just recently learned this with the iridescent, the folks that are working on the iridescent, poultry projects.
Yeah.
That's actually a genetic composite or a genetic factor that's laying within the skin but it has to have the right precursors or the right triggers in order for it to come out. So it, you know, and I believe the same is true for, you know, folks that want white birds. You know, that underlying, you know, potential can be there, and then under the right circumstances, I think you can make it pop out. But yeah, definitely corn's going to do it. You know, putting them out in direct sunlight, which chickens aren't really happy in direct sunlight anyway, for more than, you know, half hour, 45 minutes, and and fresh, lush green vegetation are going to enhance the opportunity for that color. But it's somewhere in the genetics, you know, somewhere that potential is in the genetics from somewhere previously. Now, if you keep them in a barn, you keep them in the shade, you know, you feed them commercial feed that doesn't have a lot of corn in it, you know, chances are you may never see it. But, you know, somebody could have a long family of, you know, perfectly white birds, and, you know, it could still be there. I mean, I hate to say that. Somebody's going to send me hate mail, and I'm sorry that I had to say that, but yeah, yeah. Part of it is genetic, part of it is feed. So,
all right, we're gonna stick with the thing. So Shaggy has a fish oil supplement. How far in advance of a show should I start giving it to make a difference? So I guess I don't know what exactly you're trying to change. Yeah.
Well, okay. So in the world of a chicken, and I'm gonna get hate mail for this too, but here it goes. Is oil is oil is oil is oil, right? And there's people out there that are like, oh my, I got to have extra virgin olive oil, or I got to have extra virgin coconut oil. Look, coconut oil and olive oil are probably the top two. There's nothing wrong with fish oil either, Shaggy. So if you want to use that, use that. But I'm here to tell you that once it goes in the bird's mouth and it gets processed by the bird's liver, it's going to send the oil where it needs to go. But I think you want a consistent diet that is between 6 and 8% total fat most of the time, or at least a 30 to 45 day lead to the show to get the oil content built up so the oil gland is doing its job, right? To get the look on the feathers, to get that wetter look, you know, on those feathers. I think you're going to need at least a month. No, whether it's fish oil, whether it's olive oil, whether it's coconut oil, I don't care. As my old friend says, I don't have a dog in this fight. So you do what works for you. But I just hate to see people spending top dollar for, you know, some of the different oils out there, wheat germ, fish oil, etc. I don't know that there's enough of an advantage to pay the premium price for those products.
All right, now I have a Karen question and a follow-up Karen question. So let's talk about cages, okay? So when I first got chickens, bought show cages and put my birds in them, being the only birds I had were black Australorps, and everything was fine in the world, and I didn't think anything of it. But one time I took my cages to a place where we did like a little show, and like I put some colored Dorkings in those cages, and they about killed themselves. So I feel like my birds were just lazy and fat and could care less where they were standing. But how do you have to train your birds to behave in the cages? Do you?
Yes.
Okay. How do you
We
do that?
call that coop training.
Okay.
And I will coop train several birds at a time. Each bird is cooped individually. What really sets them off and gets them to go bonkers is when they're in the coops and there's strange people around there that they aren't familiar with. That will really set them off. I judged a class of probably 30, 35 Buff Orpingtons one time, and they were maniacs. I literally had to manhandle each one out of the coop because they hadn't been trained and they hadn't learned that people were not there to pinch their heads off. But every time I would walk up to the cage, the birds would go ballistic. So it's just a matter of investing some time and getting your birds in the coop. And even if you got a friend that will come over and even just walk up and down in front of the birds with you, so they get used to seeing strange people.
So that nothing more than just there's no more to training them than just doing it, just exposing them to it.
Right.
You're not doing treats or anything special.
Mm-mm.
All right. Okay, second cage one is, I swear you once talked about training your birds to pose
Yes,
for the judge. How does one do that?
it helps if they're a little bit on the hungry side. And I'm not one for using treats a lot. I'm not a believer of adding to the diet when we're feeding a good high quality feed. It's not necessary. But I will say that nothing will grab a bird's attention faster than holding a mealworm, a live mealworm, between your fingers, and they're flopping around and wiggling. You have that bird's undivided attention. You can teach the bird to stand higher by raising your hand up, or if he's too tall, you can bring him down a little bit. But you want him to come up towards the judge. I would train mine to pose from the side. I always gave them the treat from the side of the coop, because when they're taking the treat from the side, then they're showing the judge their side view, which is the best view.
I'm gonna think about that. But there's a stance you're looking for, though, right? If you go to a show.
All right. Remember, I pointed out one of your males to you when I was up there, and I said that bird has a natural pose.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was?
With one of his feet further forward than the other, but
His foot on the offside was slightly in front, about like the measurement of his foot.
okay.
Was slightly in front of the other, and he always stopped in the same position, the same foot forward. He was alert. He wasn't alarmed, but he was alert, and he was a natural poser.
Sorry, natural poser made me laugh. All right, so Craig talks about the cage training that you can use a radio to expose them
Yes.
to different sounds in different stations. I have found with my birds in the cages that if you put them in the cages when it's dark and then as it gets light, that's a little bit alarming for them. So, I mean, how long are we talking about? I mean, are you talking about putting them in the cages? I mean, the same cages you're putting them in after their baths, like so you could have them in there for days at a time, or a few hours.
A lot of it is dependent upon the breed.
Okay.
You know, reds are going to settle down in a coop much faster than Anconas or Leghorns or something of that nature. But 2 to 3 weeks, you can, old timers used to describe it. You can leave them in there too long to where they just don't want to do anything. And they call that coop weary. They just didn't like being in there. They just didn't show well. So yeah, it's like anything. You can overdo it.
Okay.
What do you do? And this is again an ignorant question from a non-show person. Like, if you put them in there after the baths for days, like, is there a roost? I mean, you put a roost in there for them, or did just all of a sudden they're sleeping on the shavings?
The coops are not big enough to have a roost.
True. That's true.
And when you say for days, if I'm washing a chicken 3 days before a show, I'm cooping that bird in on a Friday night probably. So I'm washing that bird Tuesday evening.
Okay.
So you're talking about a 4-day run there before he's judged, maximum. So that's not an inordinate amount of time. And one thing, going back to what Craig said about using the radio, I think I still have it, as a matter of fact. I recorded some audio at an actual chicken show that I played on a loop. So they were accustomed to the sounds of a show, and it was the chickens crowing and the people talking and the turkeys gobbling and the guineas guineaing and all of that. So Whether it helped or not, I don't know, but it made me feel better. I felt like it did.
Mm,
I
makes
think
sense.
Matthew's asking, how do you know when to stop with the cages so that you don't end up with the coop weary? It's probably bird specific, right? You just observe the way they're
It
behaving.
is a little bit. I don't start coop training birds until probably, again, depending on the breed, 2 or 3 weeks before show, and then when I bring them back home, they don't go back in that coop. They go into a quarantine pen.
JS loves your idea about the worms. Talked about how similar posing is to dogs. Yep.
Yes, exactly. Just like baiting a dog.
Yeah. Although bait dog, that scared me for a second. Then I then I saw it different. And I'm thinking Craig's saying that he's got birds into cages for shows in 6 weeks. Some breeds are more feather specific than others, right?
Yes, yes.
So, all
And
right. And then,
Craig's got coachings, and they're more laid back than some other breeds might be. Um,
and this is, I had one last note on my thing that I put down, and Craig went right into it for me. So let's see. Getting them clean at home is key, but transporting them in proper containers so they arrive with minimal grooming needed prior to show. So
yes,
I think you told us before what you like to transport in.
I like a wooden box, uh, solid wood with wire in the front for ventilation and some holes in the back.
Mhm.
And I like it narrow enough where the birds cannot try to turn around. Because when birds start turning around is when they start messing up feathers. And I just cringe. I see so many people showing up to the poultry show with chickens in dog crates or turkeys in dog crates. Invariably, what's going to happen is they're going to flop around in those dog crates, taking them in or out, and they're going to mess up their plumage. But if they're in a solid wooden box, they don't have to. I'm not talking about making it out of 1x2 real thin plywood like a sheet of Luan that's thin like they put on interior house doors. That and a little 1/2 or 3/4 inch spurring strip framework is all you really need. I see folks using plastic tub containers, and they'll bore some little holes around the side, but invariably, if birds stay in there very long, you're going to see a lot of condensation showing up there. And that will wind up saturating your birds when they rub up on it.
When I took my well summer flock to Kansas, we built a bunch of sort of wooden cages like you're describing out of pegboard. So all around the three sides were pegboard with just a wire front. And that worked pretty well. I felt like it was good ventilation. Obviously not long term getting wet would not be a solution, but I didn't have to drill a million holes. That was nice. All right. This is an excellent question. We are finishing up, everybody. Sorry, but we're over an hour, Rip. You okay?
That's okay. That's okay.
All right.
What do we need to pack for the show other than the bird?
This is a really
Okay.
good. I agree.
I like to bring my feed and my water from home because they're used to that feed. Chances are, if they have feed available for you to use at a show, it's going to be scratch feed.
Mm-hmm.
If you're lucky, they might have some laying mash, but I wouldn't depend on it. Bring your own feed and water, your own feed and water cups. I like to bring a silk cloth, my little container of olive oil and rubbing alcohol. I carry just a little thing of wet wipes because invariably they're going to get dirt on them that you're going to have to try to remove and take off. Some folks carry along, like she was talking, a lady was talking about there earlier about the spray on green spray. I like to think of having to do a touch-up job there and not having to do a whole wash, because if you're really washing that entire bird, you got a wet chicken on your hands and they're not going to place well in the show. So the least amount of water you can get on your birds at that point, the better off you're going to be. Just basic. I take my Adams flea and tick spray. Nothing, nothing elaborate. Toothbrush. Yes, correct. Thank you.
For you or the birds?
Both.
Both. Maybe Craig can tell me if I can use an electric toothbrush on them.
Mm.
All right. All right. That was good. Like that. Any paperwork or anything you normally need to take, or is that all handled ahead of time?
It can vary from show to show. I would always carry my NPIP paperwork with me just in case they had lost it or something, which would also happen from time to time. Plus, you probably need it when you're crossing state lines if you stop at the agricultural inspection station. So it's always good to have that with you. Always carry a copy of your entry with you when you go. So they can say, no, you said you were entering Barred Rocks. And I said, no, right here, Rhode Island Ridge. But
nail clippers. But just getting into things people said before. Take your entry form to coop when loading birds. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good job, Rip and Craig.
And I also used a small tackle box to put all that stuff in. So it was easy to lug around.
All right. Lloyd wants to know how to find shows near him.
Poultryshow.com.
Poultry Shows Central? Poultry Show? Is it just
Poultry Show Central.
Okay.
But there's a couple of sources out there. APA lists sites, shows, but they're still getting that set up, so they're probably not going to have everything on there. But Poultry Show Central is one of the best ones. You can go on there and you can search by state, all kinds of ways, by region, by state, whatever.
All right, we're going to answer this one question that everybody, if you want to get hate mail, here we go. I'm nowhere close, Marie, I think, says, I'm nowhere close to showing a bird, but I'm curious of the protocol for bringing a bird home to the flock once it's been in a show environment. Sell the bird or quarantine?
I know some people, if they take a bird to a show, they don't bring it home, they sell it. I quarantine mine, and I brought home many birds from many shows, and honestly, I never brought home a sick bird. If you take some basic precautions, your birds will be fine. And by that I mean, you treat them last minute treatment for mites and lice. If you happen to see a sick bird in the show, very quietly, you don't want to make a big deal out of it. Let show management know, and they'll take it out.
How long you quarantine afterwards?
Till the next show? I quarantine mine for 30 days.
30 days. Okay. All right. All right. Now we got ones for Jeff here. Have y'all had any experience with fowl getting ringworms? I was told they get a little white substance, and a few mine had it on the corner of their mouths.
So that's not the ringworm that I'm familiar with. So, the ringworm that I know on mammals is, more of a fungal problem that affects the skin. So I don't have an answer for that. So
I wonder if it's canker. I wonder if they're thinking about canker.
I'm wondering if it's canker too. The only thing I know that gives you a spot like that on the beak would be canker.
If you have a picture, you could share it with us on Facebook, and maybe we could respond.
Okay. All right. Sorry, we couldn't help there. All right. I think we're good. I think we're... Oh, no, not canker. Okay. No. We don't know. Yeah.
Send us a picture. We'll try to find out.
Yeah. So, all right. Rip, you want to talk about next week? Our next show? All right. No. We're going to have a show on July 12th, and there will be a subject to be determined. Yeah. We're
still working on that.
These two here are going to be taken off and out of here. So
that's right. They're going on a much deserved vacation. So it's just going to be Karen and I next time. And
hopefully we can find a guest.
Through without them.
Special guest, but probably not. So, all right.
Thank you all for watching. We appreciate you very, very much. Hope you have a good time. Enjoy your birds and stay cool in this hot summer weather.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation by Poultry Keepers 360. All rights are reserved. This production has been made possible in part through the generous support of the Fur Trail Company, manufacturers of gardening and livestock products that are better naturally.